As a profession, law enforcement comes with many physical and mental stresses. There have been many conversations about reforms. Now departments across the state are struggling to hire and retain good officers. Some are struggling with worse, officer suicides. ABC 6 News anchor Laura Lee taking a deeper look at the issue and shows us what local departments are doing to help change the mental health stigma. She sits down with a former cop who recently quit his job and shares his story and why he says he needed the change for his own health. We do want to point out some of these interviews were conducted before the mask mandate.
The echoing sound of sirens is the call of duty for law enforcement.
2123, I copy the call en route.
Every day on the job, they live an oath to serve and protect. But for many who wear a badge, the current echo in the country is making that pledge more difficult.
But at some point, we're all human beings, right? At some point, it gets to a breaking point where you just can't take it anymore.
Forcing officers like this one to give up the oath to protect others, instead choosing to protect himself. This former officer quit his job months after the death of George Floyd. He agreed to the interview as long as he remains anonymous to protect his family and his peace.
I don't think there's any cop out there that goes to work every day and says, hey, I want to kill someone.
After more than a decade patrolling the streets, this former cop says he knew he needed change. He says his friends and family noticed he was different and irritable on the days he worked.
When I quit, there was a big weight that I felt was lifted off my chest.
And he's not the only one feeling the weight of the badge. According to Blue Help, more police officers are dying by suicide than in the line of duty. The national organization says suicides are increasing every year. In 2019, there were 236 suicides, 8 in Minnesota.
Every time they go to a situation or go just to any call, it's like a grain of sand. And a grain of sand, every time you go, a grain of sand is placed on your back. Well, the longer that you're in this career, the more sand has been put on your back, and it weighs you down.
Master Patrol Officer Jay LONIEN has been a police officer for 30 years, the last 20 with the Rochester Police Department. He says for many officers, that emotional weight is felt 24/7.
Officers are afraid to go ask for help because it makes them look weak or vulnerable. We have to be the strong ones, and we have to be the ones that are there to protect.
As a veteran cop, he has figured out how to separate work from his personal life, but he says it's not easy. That's why he steps in as a peer support team member within the city and the county departments to talk about mental health.
We need to make sure that not only they're healthy physically, but they're healthy emotionally and mentally too.
And that mental aspect means partnering with a therapist for on-site counseling.
They talk about the blue line. There's a really fine line between how an officer can perform to the very best of their ability, but how they also can balance and acknowledge their own needs.
Patty Lynch says that mental trauma, or PTSD, should be treated the same way as a physical injury in the line of duty. She says just because they don't have a bullet hole doesn't mean they're not suffering.
When an officer has to take a leave of absence because of post-traumatic stress disorder, there's a stigma.
I'm going down. I'm going down.
The fallout from the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis back in May has led to one of the largest number of officers seeking disability. More than 150 Minneapolis police officers have now filed for work-related disability, claiming PTSD from the protests and unrest days after the death of George Floyd at the hands of these 4 former Minneapolis police officers.
This is literally an unprecedented number.
Their attorney, Ron Muser, addressing the public in July, saying some of the officers he represents were at the precinct that was burned to the ground during the riots.
We're trying to develop trust within our communities.
Dodge County Sheriff Scott Rose sits on the board of the Southeast Minnesota Law Enforcement Memorial Foundation. He says he has made changes in his own department to make sure deputies can get help if they need it, requiring a debrief after every traumatic call, offering counselors to staff.
They're the people who are going to risk everything and risk their life to help somebody they probably never even met. And they do it every day. And not only that, but their families are saying goodbye to them every day. fully knowing that they might not come back.
He says law enforcement needs support from the top down, from lawmakers to administrators to the community.
Have you guys had those conversations about suicides with law enforcement?
We need to change the narrative. We need to make sure that our guys and gals know that it's okay not to be okay.
That includes more access to free counseling and the respect to take time off for disability without fear of losing their jobs.
If it's an incident where our guys or gals are having a problem with it or having a problem processing with it or dealing with it and they need to talk to somebody, that's something that we created. That's something that this job created, so we should be taking care of them and making sure that they've got the help that they need.
Do you think an officer carries way more weight than an average person?
Oh, without a doubt. I think that officers really carry the burden of safety for the community. There are a lot of expectations on officers that they're always going to be there, they're always going to do their job, they're not going to make mistakes, you know, and that if they do, that's going to be the headline.
In the past couple of years, the issue of racial injustice and police reform are making headlines. The deaths of Michael Brown, Jamar Clark, and most recently George Floyd sparking movements and legislative change at both the state and federal levels.
I don't think there's any cop in this country that goes out and puts their uniform on and says, I want to go out and kill a black person today. It's complete.
According to a 2020 U.S. News and World Report, there was more than 1,000 unarmed people who died during altercations with police between 2013 to 2019. About a third of them were black.
So are you saying that you don't believe that there are bad officers out there who abuse their authority?
Oh, of course there are, right? Unfortunately. There's always going to be the bad apples in every bunch, no matter what profession you're in. You know that you only have a split second to make a decision, and you try and you do your damnedest to make the right decision.
Perhaps that is the biggest thing he says the public needs to know, that officers are human and grieve about those actions as well.
Cops that, you know, are in those situations that, you know, have had to take somebody's lives probably grieve and deal with it for quite some time, and it probably takes a huge toll on not only them, but, you know, their families.
And that toll is being felt in many departments across the state.
That's why our numbers are down for applications. That's why our retirements are up. That's why our early retirements are up. That's why our suicide rate is higher than our line of duty deaths.
Because then you go home at the end of the day, maybe hurt, physically, emotionally, frustrated. You know, so where's the incentive to go back to work then?
You're supposed to be this tough guy protecting everyone, so then who protects you?
I don't know how to answer that.
He may not know the answer, but his solution to leave when he did is proving to be the right one for him.